Уважаемые гости, проходите, пожалуйста, в зал, присаживайтесь.
Come on in, take a seat. We are going to hear the presentation by Autodesk experts. Grab the opportunity. And Azamat will tell you a couple of words more. Hello, everyone. We are going to have an online presentation. Our expert is in Germany. He is the leading Maya expert in our company, ENG R Reyer. He is going to talk about the future products of Autodesk for the game industry. Maya and Stingray, our API, and about Shotgun. And he will be ready to take your questions after the presentation. Besides, we and my colleague Leonid and Nikolai are also here. We can help you if you have some questions about our products.
Mike. Thank you very much. I didn't understand what you were saying. Hello, all together. My name is Roland Reyer. I'm the technical specialist for the Maya side of things in Germany. And today I would like to show you a little presentation about new features in Maya 2016 Extension 2, which was just released on the last Monday. It was announced on the NAB in Las Vegas on last Monday, actually. And if we find time, we will also have a short look into Stingray, which is going to be live. So I've recorded the Maya session yesterday so that we have a better quality here, because the Adobe Connect is usually a little bit, slow performance when you do some sort of a live presentation. But then for Stingray, I'm going to try to make it live to show you what the product is like and what it looks like. And of course, we cannot go too far in such a short presentation here. So the first part will be Maya 2016 Extension 2. And let me show you a few slides before we start about the content that we have. So at least for the Maya presentations, we have received content for The Witcher Wild Hunt, the latest version of The Witcher. So we received some demo data from CD Projekt Red in Warsaw, as well as from Digic Pictures in Budapest, who did the cinematics for The Witcher. So, and here are the features, at least those that we are talking about in the video. So first we're going to have a look at the new modeling features in 2016 Extension 2. So things like improvements to the transforms and pivots workflow, general modeling improvements, and of course some improvements made to the symmetry workflow. So when you want to make symmetrical changes to an object or build up something symmetrically, more and more tools are working together with the symmetry, so that you can work on one side of the object and at the same time you are on the other side of the object. So all of these will be shortly mentioned in the video. And then very big changes are to the UV system in Maya 2016. So the ability to symmetrize UVs, you see in the upper right corner here, that image, we have a paintbrush that symmetrizes UVs, as well as nice changes to the layout system that takes all the pieces and lays them out in the UV coordinate system. This one here I will probably skip from the video because we won't have time for that within 1 hour. So a new render setup system in 2016 allows you to separate, to set up not only render layers for software rendering, but it allows you to segment your scene and automatically collect objects by name, for example, or by certain hierarchy aspects. And that is a very nice addition to the system. Many light artists will love this, really. And there's also a new light editor included in the extension 2, which allows you to see all the lights at once and change all the properties of the lights in one place. I would skip these two sessions or these two features from the final video because we won't have time for that. And here's an interesting thing in 2016, that is the new blend shade editor. Blend shade are something like, everybody thinks they are blend shades. I know everything about blend shades, but this new editor here and the new workflow that we have with the blend shades is a really interesting addition to the known things for blend shades. now you can really use blend shapes so much faster than in the past and get to your results much faster. And part of that is also this pause editor. The pause editor is using blend shapes as a corrective for blend shape or for pose problems. For example, when the character rises his arm and you see some deformation problems on the shoulder, you can now go in directly and say, here's the point, I want to correct this. You draw with our brush system in Maya, you correct the shape, and that's it. So it gets automatically applied and automatically interpolated with neutral poses so that you don't have to care for them. So these are some of the features you're going to see in the video. So we're going to dive right in here in my next slide. I need to load here the video because I saw that we won't have time for the long version, including the render layout thing here. So here's the short version of the video. I'm going to mute my microphone, and then at the end we will have time, I hope we will have time to dive into Stingray a little bit and also to have questions at the very end. So, and Azamat is going to tell me if there's something going wrong. So here's my video. In this session, we're going to be looking at some of the new features and enhancements in Maya 2016 Extension 2, because these new features and enhancements will directly influence what is going to happen in the special effects, film and TV and advertisement market in the next few years. For this presentation, I'm going to be using this demo material here. This geometry comes from the game The Witcher. You probably know it. It was produced by the company CD Projekt Red in Warsaw, and they were so kind to give us this geometry of The Witcher, of the main character of the game. And we also have geometry from the company Digic Pictures in Budapest, who was doing the cinematics for this game. I'm going to use this geometry to show some of the enhancements made to the symmetrical modeling in Maya 2016 and also to the UV texturing and object placement directly in Maya. So let me switch off some of the decoration that we have here, so the body, for example, and his weapons, and have a look at the geometry. As I said, this is the very simple game geometry. And when I select the face, for example, you notice it selects it, and when I switch on mirroring now, or symmetry rather, in the topological mode, you see that it also selects the one on the opposite side. So the facet on the other side is automatically also selected, so that it converts, as soon as you switch on symmetry, it's going to convert this selection and let you do it whatever you want to do on both sides. So when we now go into the multicut tool, you will see that I can do multicut, or all features of the multicut on both sides of the geometry without doing anything special. So it will automatically select things on the both sides, and it will also, depending on what is selected, always do all kinds of things on both sides. So now when we go, for example, into the offset edge loop tool, you will see that this one also is completely symmetrical now and does this thing, and the visual feedback also on both sides. And that's very important, not only to have the final results on both sides, but also the visual feedback. Another interesting one here, for example, is the insert edge loop tool, which lets me select. And you see, it automatically completes the cut and also does that on the other side. So here we see a mirror or an X-ray feedback of this cut on the other side. So I can now deselect some of these edges here and shift, add select some of these edges here. And you will see, now it's cutting through all of these. And I can still take my mouse pointer and, shift this left and right on the surface to get the right portion of the cuts here. And then when I hit enter, it will automatically complete that cut where I placed it. And of course, do that on both sides. So this whole symmetrical modeling works very well. We can also go and use this, and let me go back into object mode and maybe just shade it in gray so that we can use this to maybe have a look at the quad draw tools that also work with symmetry and topological symmetry here. So let me take this one here and do some smoothing, some subdivision, so that I have a nicer and smoother surface, and pick the geometry again. And now I will do this and create what we call a live object out of this. So here in the on the right side in my modeling toolkit, I'm going to do the quad draw. First, I'll switch on the symmetry here. So on the world x-axis, for example. So now when I do quad draw on the surface, so when I place points here, you see what happens. It puts points on both sides. So when I do this and create some sort of a polygon strip, now I hold Shift key and create these polygons. You see that they happen on both sides. And I can also, place points close to the center, and there's a certain snapping distance, a snapping tolerance that allows me to set one point in the middle, and now I can set these in the middle. Which is very cool because I can now also, for example, hold the Tab key, and with the middle mouse button I can do an extend here of the whole edge, or I could do the outer side of the whole thing and extend these things. I can hold the Shift key and relax all of these edges here a little bit to make a nicer and cleaner geometry. So you see all of this retopology workflow works now completely in symmetry, which lets you easily recreate complicated objects. For example, when you have created a scan and have a very high resolution object, you can easily replicate it with our quad draw tool and retopologize this geometry. Okay, so far for the symmetry. Let's remove this. I'll pick the geometry and switch off the live object, and I'll also turn down this smoothing geometry. So the smooth surface, I'll turn it down to 0 so that we are back to the original geometry that we had before with a regular shader. So let's have a look at the other features. What happens when I model this geometry and I want to move it over to the other side? In most cases, you could cut the object apart and simply take this one side and copy it over to the other side and sew the pieces together, which doesn't work here because we have different UVs on both sides. So you see that this scar here, for example, makes the whole thing non-symmetrical. So I don't want to take this portion here with the UVs together and put it on the other side. But there is better ways. So let me take the sculpting brush here, and maybe for the ear of the character, I'm going to just pull it out a little bit to show that I have modified something. That is, of course, something we don't want to do to this character. So that's completely not belonging to the game. So to take these actually I have to switch off symmetry for now. So to take these changes here and move them over to the other side has become really easy in the mesh or in the edit mesh settings. You find something that we call symmetrize, which takes the selected components and does the same thing on the other side, given an edge that shows the system where the symmetry is. So I always have to pick one of these center edges here to show the system where the center is. So that is the symmetrize feature. I'll undo that and pick these edges here again on this side. And the flip is the accordion thing, but it flips the shape over. It takes the one side, puts it on the other, and takes the other side and puts it on the first side, so that you have flipped it. And you see my UVs did not move at all. My UVs are still the same, which is very important here. So let me undo that. So this modification is on the character's left side now. And let me go into another function that actually looks as if it could solve these problems, but it actually does not. But here we have other possibilities. So for example, I can take this whole character here and mirror it to the other side. And it has done that now, so it's taken the whole geometry and put it on the other side, and also taken the UVs. You see that this thing has cut my object into pieces and mirror it to the other side. There's even a way to say, instead of a certain axis or a certain direction rather, I want a custom axis, like the z-axis. You see what's happening here. So it simply takes the whole object and cuts it apart, mirrors it and sews the pieces together, because they, at the mirror axis, of course, they have all the vertices there. Okay, so you get the idea. I'll stop that, and I'll also undo that, because we don't want all of these modifications here. We don't want the UVs to be in one place only. That's not what we need here. So let's have a further look at the modeling tools in Maya 2016 that help you make this whole thing a little bit easier. So for example, we have these weapons here. Let me switch on the body and the head, of course, and maybe I'll switch on this crossbow down here between his feet. And before we can use this, actually what I need to do something else. So here on the crossbow, we see that we have several objects. So, right, so we have lots of pieces here on the crossbow that are all, there's no hierarchy for the crossbow. So I could, of course, take all of these pieces and sew them together, but the question is, where would the new pivot be? So for this object, for example, the pivot is down here. For this one, the pivot is down here. For this one, the pivot is down here. So normally in such an operation, in such a combine operation, we go shift right mouse button and go to the combine. In a combine operation, it's normally the center. So it simply takes an average pivot position for the new created object. Now we can also do the last object, and you can define the last object by simply picking and picking it again. So this is now my last picked object. My new pivot for the combined object is going to sit here. So I'll apply that. So now it's one object that we can move around in the scene. When I switch on the grid, you see that this new pivot is now several inches away from the center of the grid. So these units here are not reflected in my transformations. So obviously my object is transformed somehow, but I can't see it. I mean, the solution is easy. Here in the transform node, under pivots, you will see, oh, this is the translation that we see for the pivot, so that the pivot is moved by this amount away from the center. And of course, I could take this number and paste it into here to make the whole thing move to the center. But what if I want to leave this object where it is, but I want to see the actual translation away from the center? I can do that now with the new function, which is the bake pivot. So bake pivot lets me bake the position and orientation of the pivot and bake it back into my translation. So the pivot is now 0, 0, 0, but the object is moved, which is kind of cool, because you can now juggle these transformations back and forth. So let me switch on the body of the character again, and also the skeleton and the weapons now. And I have to adjust the display of the skeleton here, because it was initially created using a smaller size. So this one should be 1 here. So now I want to take this crossbow and put it in the hands of the character. So here's a joint in the hand of the character, and I want to take this crossbow and actually take the transformations from this joint and put them in the crossbow. And that is done with this new menu here, the match transforms. I can say, okay, match the translation, and it takes the crossbow and moves it to where this pivot is. And I can also match the rotation, or actually match all transformations, and it will put the crossbow or copy all of these transformations on the crossbow. So there's another example. I can take the crossbow and say it's actually the position for this crossbow is here on the back. That's where the crossbow sits on this character, and it's properly placed. And accordingly, I could take the sword and the joint on the hip here, match all transforms, and then of course, this letter thing here and the joint and match all transforms, and oh, here we have a problem. So let me undo that here. And we see here that the sword itself has the proper pivot sitting somewhere here, the handle. So somewhere close here to the handle, but the sheath of the sword does not have the proper pivot. So the pivot of this one here sits in the wrong place. Of course, I could group them together and place them here and maybe ungroup them afterwards, but you get the idea. We want to actually copy the pivot from this one over to this one, and you see it already here. We have a matched pivots. So select the destination objects first, and then the one pivot that you want to copy on all of them last, and then match pivots. And now you see the sheath of the sword has the correct pivot. I can pick them both and then take the joint and match all transforms, and you see now this object sits properly. Okay, my next example has something to do with the UV coordinates of these geometries, which is very important. So with these, this is the head of the Witcher, and you see that we have some sort of UVs already here, but it's a little bit deformed. So you see that this is not symmetrical. It's actually not necessary to have it symmetrical. Actually, if you want to place the pieces of UVs on top of each other, they need to have the same shape, but symmetry doesn't make much sense here. And it's also, a little bit of a problem because we don't have a center here for this object. So I always would have to define an edge to define the topological symmetry axis for this object. But now it is possible because many people asked for it. We now have this scale or symmetrized UV tool over here in the green brackets. So when I click this, it asks me select an edge to define the topological symmetry seam. It's this one here, bang. So, and it places a black line there, and holding my control and using the middle mouse button, I can move the black line back and forth. There's actually a snapping position or a snapping distance there for that, to make it snap to even positions within the UVs. And now I have this brush, and I can use the brush on one side to simply brush the symmetry. So I'm copying positions over from the left side here over to the right side. That's where I'm drawing. And I can easily do it the other way around. So I'm moving over to the other side, and I'm brushing, and I'm copying UVs from the left side, from the right side over to the left side. So it's really easy to do this, to make these things symmetrical. It's very nice new feature. So other things that we have here, let's have a look at this example here. This is a broken wheel from the assets of the game The Witcher, and you see in the UVs we have a lot of pieces, so it was unwrapped, everything was unwrapped properly and placed in various UV tiles. And in this case, I mean, for this wheel, I don't need several UV tiles. Actually, I want to place them all in one tile, have a certain distance to each other, and I want to do it all at once. And there's a reworked function that was there before, which is the layout UVs. It's this button over here. Actually, here in the polygons, you can also go to layout UVs, and this layout UVs has been reworked. Let me reset the settings first and simply take all of these pieces and put them in one tile first, so that we can have a look. This is not bad. I mean, it's pretty fast, and it has done a fairly good job to put them all together in one tile. And you see it even fills round or hollow pieces of the UVs. It fills in other pieces of the UV, so it uses the space as good as it can. It could be a little bit better because all of these rotated pieces here in the middle could be horizontal or vertical, and make a better use of the whole space. So what we could do is actually say a pre-rotation for everything could be horizontal, and then let's rearrange the whole thing. So you see now we have a different packing here. Maybe not even better, but it's a different way to pack everything. And of course, we can take several shells and just orient or rearrange those. Okay, so let's go to the next and last example for the UVs. This tree here is a very typical example. I mean, a tree is not so important that you want to spend so much time with it. So for such a tree, we first need some UVs. We cannot go without UV, so we could go into the UV menu here and just create some planar mapping on the tree so that we can start doing, laying this out. So that is a prerequisite for the following. And then we have a new way to cut this thing apart. So in this dialog here, the auto seams is a function that will automatically go through and cut this object into pieces given this splitting tolerance. And you play around with the splitting tolerance and it gives you various results. So let me try this one here. Apply a tolerance of 0.2 and then I can display these cuts here a little bit better. So you see it has made some cuts along the trunk and along all of these branches here, so that I now would be able to do an automatic layout of this whole object here. So let's pick the whole object and then lay it out with the automatic unfold function. And you see the unfold function is able to unfold the complete tree in one piece, which is very surprising, because I personally, if I had to do that, I would not be able, at least not in this time, to cut this whole tree apart so that it is one piece and it's completely unfoldable. So one thing that is still not working too well is the fact that, there's a lot of stretching going on here to get all of these branches side by side, and you have to stretch the trunk a little bit. So we want to cut this into pieces. We can now play around with these settings here and give it a different tolerance and cut this tree again. And now what it's going to do is to cut off the branches. So what we can do now here is with these cut off branches, we can simply do the layout again. So let's say, well, maybe I'll do the unfolding again here. We can close this now. Now we have these pieces, and some of the pieces are not cut properly, but I can easily take my split UVs brush and simply brush across these pieces here to cut off or to make the cuts that the tool has not done. So that is an easy and fun way to make my splits here. You see that I'm just drawing a line over it. I can also double click on lines on edge loops to make the cuts here, and then on others I would use the brush, simply cut that off. That was not such a good idea. Maybe I'll do it better like so, and maybe cut this one here. I don't know, that should be enough. And now we want to actually not unwrap everything, but I want to lay it out again. And you see we have this horizontal restriction here already. I need to pick the whole tree again and apply it, and you see now it lays everything out horizontally. I can further restrict it and say, okay, it's not going to be the full square, it's going to be the left half of this full square, so it cramps everything into the left half of my UV coordinate system, so that I have space for other pieces as well. So you see this whole mechanism is very modern already. So in the past, customers were complaining that they need to buy additional plugins to do the UV layout. That is no longer necessary. So Maya does a very good job in laying out the UVs and unfolding and packing the UV shells into the UV coordinate system, or in several tiles even, if you like. So it's no longer necessary to go into third-party products to do this. So in this last part of the presentation, I'd like to show you a technique that was existing before but has been really enhanced and really improved for the user to become so much easier. So in this scenery, I've taken the model of the Witcher and started some sort of a rigging just to illustrate a few points. So let me first explain what the rig is here. When I select this skeleton, you see that hit Control 1 and isolate it. You see that the eyes of this character are attached to this skeleton here. They are actually grouped to the skeleton. And I've done a certain special eye setup. You see this little cross here, that is a selection handle. It lets me pick a locator that sits in the middle of this eye. Both eyes have an orient constraint that makes them follow the rotation of this locator without being parented. The advantage of orient constraints is that I can blend between different constraints. So this is the one constraint, and attached to this object, you see that I have an eye look at. Here's the second constraint. So when I set this value here to 1, it blends the orient constraints of the eyes to be an aim constraint at the camera. So both eyes are looking at the viewer or at the current camera, which makes it a little bit creepy and uncanny when these eyes are looking at you. So let me do this, put this back at 0. So now again the eyes are following the rotation of this one locator here. Which is cool because I just have one object to place. I don't need to place a look at, because most of the time people cannot tell what these two eyes are looking at. It could be something very close here or something very far away. So that's not a big deal. So let me zero out the rotations of this object here and switch on the rest of the widget. So when I pick this object again, this eye rotation thing, you will see a certain thing happens when I rotate the eyes. You see that the eyes are influencing the eyelids, which is cool because I don't have to care for the eyelids now. So I can grab the eyes, and wherever they look, the eyelids will follow somehow in a certain range. Of course, you know, the eyelids will not go any further if I really rotate it down. Accordingly, when the eyes are looking at the camera, you know, wherever the camera or the viewer is, the eyes are focusing the camera, and the eyelids will follow to make the whole thing look natural. Which is cool because it, you know, it allows me to just do my eye animation and not take care for the eyelids, because the eyelids have to surround the eyeballs at all times. And then I also have a cluster, you know, these eyelid animation or this eyelid movement was done using a cluster for the upper eyelid and the lower eyelids. And you see this cluster can also be rotated independently with these values here, which allows me to close the eyes or do a squint or something like that. So yeah, that's a neat little thing that I can use to for my animation. But you also see that accessing my objects here becomes more and more difficult. So I can't see the clusters anymore. I have to use these bundled channels on my control object to actually control what I'm doing. If I add more stuff, it becomes more difficult. And that's why I've chosen to create a custom user interface. Here's a custom user interface using Attribute Collection 2.07. Attribute Collection is part of the bonus tools. You can get it for free every year. My colleague Stephen Rosell releases the bonus tools for Maya at the area.autodesk.com, which is our community website. You can find it in the help menu here in Maya Communities, the area product community. That is where you load this kind of stuff, this kind of free material. So this custom user interface contains, for example, a slider for the jawbone rotation, a slider for the look at thing, a slider for the eyelids, upper eyelid, lower eyelid, and reset buttons to, you know, set these values to 0 again when I've done something with that. So custom user interface is very helpful. So what we want to do now is to add new blend shapes to this geometry to be able to do certain things. For example, animate the eyebrows to make him look angry, or a corrective blend shape for the mouth. So look when I open the mouth, look what it looks like when I look in from the front. You see it's really boring, not very nice. So we need to do something about it. Let me first switch off the decoration of the character, so all the background stuff and maybe the beard also, hide that. And we can also a little bit later we can hide the skeleton as well. Look at that. It looks really dull. It's not a very good character animation. When a human opens his mouth, you would see some stretching. you know, the skin would stretch, the cheeks would become thinner, the nose gets a little bit stretched. So and we want to do that with this, what we call a corrective blend shape. But instead of, you know, duplicating the surface, making the blend shape, hooking it up with a blend shape, make a driven key for the jawbone and all of that stuff, I use a new mechanism called post-space deformers. So first I'll open the blend shape editor here and switch off the eyelid thing. The eyelids are hooked up as a blend shape, so there's a head, a copy of the whole head, and I change the eyelids on this one here and mix it in as a blend shape. So I can switch off the blend shapes separately. So this one here is this post-space deformer editor. And I start by picking this joint here and saying I want a new pose interpolator for this bone. And you can twist or, you know, you can correct the twist or the swing of a bone or both. And it's creating 3 neutral poses for this bone here to be able to dial back into the neutral pose. And then I open the mouth as far as my user interface lets me do it and say, okay, for this pose, I want to add a corrective blend shape now. And I want to add it to my existing blend shape node that I have already for the eyelids. Okay? So this red button here means now we are in the edit mode. I can now change and adjust this geometry, and I actually can hide my joints already. I can now take this geometry and just correct what I want to correct. So the first thing I want to correct is this crippled geometry in the corners of the mouth that comes from the neutral pose somehow. So I'll take my smoothing brush here, or my relax brush. The brush is way too big, so I'll make it smaller here. So with my relax brush, I simply draw over the corners of the mouth a little bit to relax this funny geometry so that it's you don't see it when the mouth is open. And the second thing that I do is to use my grab brush, and now I need to switch on the symmetry, make it bigger, and then grab the cheeks and scale them in a little bit, you know, and move everything and, you know, do the whole stretching thing that happens in the mouth when you open it, you know, when you overstretch it like this character does here. And I don't even have to leave the tool to try it out. I can simply use my slider here to try out what's happening. And you see, wow, now it stretches. It looks very natural. So we can now leave the tool, and sometimes it happens that you get these colors here. Don't worry, just go to the color sets, take a different color set and switch off the edit thing here. We don't need that anymore. I don't even need to have it selected. And you see the interpolation goes automatically.
Okay, guys,
Okay.
we are, unfortunately, we could not make do with the video, but we are moving on to the Q&A session. Thank you to all of us who stayed for it. He can hear us. We will type your questions, and he will give your answers. So let's start. Есть вопросы у кого-нибудь, ребят?
Any questions in the audience?
Он нас слышит и...
Can he hear us? So what about Maya 2017? I think you've been asked those questions frequently, right? When rather than how?
The question about the version numbers came up a few times already because everybody was expecting Maya 2017. At the moment, I cannot officially talk about a release date for Maya 2017 because right now Autodesk is still tied to the American rules for a public company. So these rules say when you announce a product, you have to release it within 3 months. So if I would talk now about Maya 2017 and advertise what is in there and how good it is, and so Autodesk would be forced to release it within 3 months. So I cannot make any announcements. The point with the version numbers is actually not a real problem, because we are calling it Maya 2016 extension 2, but when you see how many new features are in there, because we not only have the things that you've seen already, we have the new mesh plugin in there for motion graphics, for example. There are extensions to Bifrost and to XGen for the hair generation. So all of these new features make up a new version, make up a big new version. It's actually a very good big release. The point here is all our customers that are under subscription get this extension release for free. Okay, so if you are a current customer, you shouldn't have any worries about release numbers, because you get a big package already. So by the time when this Maya 2017 comes out, there will be other features also included, and of course all of these features from the extension, which normally the extension is a preview to the next big release, to the 1-year release that we are talking about. So don't worry about the version numbers. That has nothing to say. We are giving our customers a big package of new features and enhancements and bug fixes, of course, behind the scenes. There's always being bug fixes. So that shouldn't be a problem for you. And in summer, by the time when we end selling perpetual licenses, currently we are still selling the Entertainment Creation Suite. So when we end selling perpetual licenses, version numbers don't matter anymore at all. So this 2017 issue will be gone, and there might be a 2017 issue, or we just keep on releasing new features for Maya and going on like that. I hope that answers the question.
Yeah, thanks. Следующий вопрос.
Thank you. Next question, please. Are there any other questions? The tools you described, when you can mirror the geometry and transform the sub-objects, does it depend when your object is on the fact whether your object is placed in the center of your coordinate system?
I did not understand the question.
Yeah.
So the question was about tools working with the symmetry. Do they work only if the object is located strictly in the center of coordinates, or does it work independently?
Can you please repeat it? I barely hear something.
Should we type it for you?
Azamat, can you repeat that?
Лучше подойдите сюда. Мне кажется, микрофон отсюда считывает.
Okay, thank you. So the question was about the tools working with the symmetry. Do they only work if the object is placed directly in the center of the coordinates, or do they work independently of this?
So yeah, the tool works independent from the positioning of the whole thing in the UV, because you are setting the symmetry axis directly on the object. So one way when you start the tool is to select an edge to tell the system where the symmetry axis is, or the symmetry axis. So you should know what you are seeing currently, and then it places a line, a black line there, so you can mirror across the line. And you can also shift the line back and forth. There's a snapping turned on, maybe you have seen that. and this snapping can be turned off, so you can move the line smoothly anywhere where your object is actually, but it needs some sort of topological symmetry to know, what piece of geometry here is the piece of geometry over there.
Спасибо. Есть еще вопросы?
Do we have any other questions? Anyone?
У меня вопрос немножко не по теме.
A little bit off the topic, but I believe Autodesk people could answer that. Are you planning to integrate Arnold, whether with Maya or with Max?
We are definitely working on that. So there is an Arnold version for Maya already there, and of course we are also looking into a plugin for 3ds Max. I cannot communicate, and even my managers cannot communicate a specific time frame. But yes, of course. I mean, that's a pretty clear thing that we are looking into an integration of Arnold into our products. At the moment, it still stays as it is. So when you buy a Maya, you still receive a Mental Ray license, for example, because many customers also rely on that, and that they receive Mental Ray licenses. For the future, of course, we will have a look at that. The plans are not yet finished, and some of the developments are not yet finished, so we cannot announce anything. But I'm pretty sure, personally, that we don't have to wait for long for announcements what happens with the Arnold renderer in all of our products.
Это был последний вопрос. Спасибо вам большое за ваше терпение. Мы
Yeah, that was the last question. Thank you so much for your patience, and we apologize for the inconvenience, and let's give them warm and loud applause so that they can hear and be rendered over Skype to Germany.
Спасибо всем еще раз. Извините.
Thanks once again, and thank you for your patience and good mood.